The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again.
Here's the deal with me. This is why I'm genuinely excited about this. Listen, I love the wrestlers. The wrestlers are great, and you know wrestlers come in and out of our door here every week. But for me, when I can talk creative with somebody, and when I can talk creative with a man who accomplished the things that he did, who I call a creative genius, not just what he accomplished in the wrestling business as a character, and we'll talk about that, but a writing level, a booking level. This is the guy, quite frankly, and this is never said, when you talk about the Monday Night Wars, this is the guy that was largely responsible for kicking Vince McMahon's backside in the WWE. I mean, that's a fact. Everybody knows I'm a numbers guy. Look at this guy's track record during the Monday Night Wars. He was the guy that had a lot to do with taking Vince McMahon down. I'm talking about the great taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent. After that intro, I'm going to hire you as my public relation man. Vinny, thank you very much. But, you know, here's the thing. The same thing goes to you. And I think I'm very excited, Vince, to be talking to you. Because, I mean, the perception is probably out there, we're diametrically opposed, right, in our philosophy. But I don't think that. I think that we're a lot closer than we are opposed. It's just, like I told someone the other day, they were talking about, well, why doesn't somebody do this or Vince do that? I said, my friend, if that was that easy, you turn to page 64 and say, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
You know,
right.
It's like a geometry problem. You can figure out a geometry problem no matter how hard it is if you're smart enough. But in wrestling, there are things that you'd say, and I'm sure it happened to you on a dozen times. Hey, I'm going to say something, you know, you put me over. Hey, Stone Cold, brother, that's yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, well, no. Hey, I'm going to give you credit where it's due. Stone Cold revolutionized the wrestling business, and it wasn't by luck that when Goldberg came along, you know, I mimicked him as much as I could. The black tights, the short boots, you know, the Mike Tyson thing. But I couldn't have Goldberg, like you did a lot of writing for Steve. Goldberg didn't have that ability at that time to talk. Yeah. So, I mean, you did the same thing on your end. And when we were kicking Vince's ass, I don't think if you weren't there that Vince would have survived. You know, you were giving him enough to be competitive when it was like the Exodus. You know, they all left in masses and crossed over from Egypt. Yeah. And you had to bust your ass. And the other thing is, I've never worked for Vince, but I got to give you kudos to get the things you wanted done. You had to either tight walk the rope or give it to him in a way that he would say, Vince, I have a great idea, you know, after you've given it to him 2 days ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. So kudos to you. It goes both ways.
Kevin, listen, this show is about you, the great Kevin Sullivan. And Kevin, I want to get something out in the open. Because, right. Kevin, you know, bro, you know how the wrestling business is. You know the drama. You know the yentas. You know everything that comes with the wrestling business, okay? I want people to see here firsthand from me and from you how when you know, first of all, bro, when you're in it, Kevin, when you're in the thick of things, your perception a lot of times is wacko. Because I had a perception when I was at WCW and we got to work with each other, and I've talked about this on the air, but Kevin, 17 years later, Vince Russo can now look back on the situation at myself, and I could say, wait a minute, bro. Wait a minute. Maybe it wasn't what you thought it was back then. So, Kevin, I want to talk about this first because I think it's important. Okay?
Right.
Kevin, when I went, let me first say this. When I was at WWE, like you said, Kevin, I was Vince's golden goose, which meant he 100% protected me. He had my back. Nobody effed with Vince Russo. Vince Russo was the golden goose. It was kind of like, Kevin, if you screwed with me, it was like screwing with Vince McMahon directly. So, Kevin, that gave me the freedom. I never had to worry about politics, backstabbing, none of that stuff. All I had to worry about was writing the best show possible because I knew nobody was going to F with me because of Vince.
Right.
So I really got to do what I did best. So now, Kevin, I go from that environment to WCW. Right. And, Kevin, I can tell you, the first time I walked in a WCW locker room, I felt like a ginormous bullseye was on my back. I just felt like every time I turned around, people were talking, and that protection was gone. All of a sudden now, I was right in the middle of what I think was just a political mess. Okay? So, Kevin, for the first time in the business, honestly, and you'll appreciate this, I became very, very, very paranoid. Okay? Right. So, Kevin, one thing that I remember is I became so paranoid. Everybody was out to get me. Everybody was out to screw me. They want to take my job, yada, yada, yada. And I remember there were a couple of instances where I would see you and JJ talking to each other. Right. And because of my paranoia, I saw this later on. Because of my paranoia, I was like, those sons of bitches are plotting to take me down. Screw Sullivan, screw JJ. But now, now, Kevin, looking at it, I'm like, bro, I was such a paranoid wreck. They screwed with my head. I thought everybody was out to get me. I was able to apologize to JJ years later, which meant the world to me, but I was never able to apologize to you. But I know you understand what they did to me to make me think that way.
Okay, and I'm glad we're clear in the air. Now I'm going to tell you a story. Before you came in, Kevin Nash was the booker. He was going through some personal trauma, and they were going to give me back the book. I said, don't do this now, please, because Kevin doesn't need another kick in the nuts, okay? And I said, he's going to give it up anyway, and he's going to give it up to me. Kevin and I are close, as you know. Yep. And he's close to you, Vinny. So, he's a great guy. Yes. If, strip down the mean guy. They had the best good cop, bad cop. Hall would walk in and say, oh, he's pissed off tonight. Everybody be on their toes. It was such bullshit. And it got, as you say, now that you look back, right? But so I said, don't do it. So Kevin came up to, Bill had taken over and JJ back, and he said, hey, I got some things I got to sort out. Why don't you give the book back to Kevin? And they said, that's fine. They called me, I believe it was on a Sunday night. They said, we got a chance to get Russo or Ferrara, and what do you think? My first immediate reaction was, do I still have a job? They said, of course. Of course you got a job. I said, fine. I said, bring them in, and let them have a run at it. He's been successful in New York. Okay, I come in, we meet each other. I and you were gracious enough to say to me, okay, I'd like you to stay in the book and not help you, you know what I mean? But throw ideas out. I was with you and I listened to you, what you were doing, throwing ideas out. And JJ, it's funny, I just talked to JJ yesterday. I haven't talked to him in a while. He's a great guy, as you know. Bill Bush. Okay, there is no right or wrong as long as you put asses in seats. But you were, in my head, at this time, you were Salvatore Dali compared to their Rembrandts. You know what I mean? It was a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. And, Salvatore Dali, in fact, probably was the most successful because he made his money while he's still alive, right?
Right.
So they, and I'm not giving this an excuse. They and I can understand the paranoia because it was such a different breed that you were bringing in. Yeah. They actually, when we had that meeting that one time, they actually put it on me to tell you. I'm not the guy in charge. Bill Bush is in charge. Right. And I can remember the meeting, and I said, Vince, maybe we need to do a little more of this or that. And you, rightfully so, and you're smart enough to look back. We age. We get some maturity, hopefully. We understand keeping grudges is ridiculous. We understand everybody has their own opinion, and it's because where they were coming from then. Well, they told me to say this to you, and I remember you getting very upset, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. And I came out of the meeting, and they said, you didn't go far enough. I said, listen, I'm working with a guy, and I think he's doing a pretty good job. Why you hired him, give him a chance. And I also think, Vince, the reason why you had the paranoia was, I think Bill Bush had paranoia at the time. Mm-hmm. He came from, he came from being a bean counter to being in charge, where they said, whatever you want to do, Bill, we'll go for it. But every week, Brad was pulling him in, because I do believe that Brad had an ultimate goal, to make some money on this thing. And they were bringing him in, and he was getting paranoid. And then you had a split dressing room. You had the younger guys that you were given a chance to, and then you had the older veterans that were clinging on and to these huge paychecks and saying, oh, he's not following the path. So it was like the irresistible force hitting the immovable object. It just collided. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that in respect to you, looking back, that there was guys, and you were probably paranoid like I was paranoid too, in the position you were, but there was guys there that not just were undermining you to get a position, they were trying to finagle a long-term deal out of this. And some of your so-called fans, and I don't want to mention one of them, but, he came back after a human resources thing in WWE. He had gotten released from WCW from Human Resources. When JJ asked me about him coming in, I said, JJ, I love him, but I remember him walking into the travel department and showing a picture out of Playboy in the center and saying, what do you think of this, girls? Vinny's going to send me, I thought that was a rib. Vinny's going to send me to look at these girls. So
Kevin, do you know, Kevin? Hey, let me tell you why I'm laughing, because Conan just a couple of days ago told me that same person showed him the same Playboy in an airport.
yeah, okay.
That's why I'm laughing. The exact same story. Go ahead.
So I remember him telling JJ, as I'm coming into JJ's office, him saying to JJ, times have changed, in which they had. But my belief is that there were some guys you were leaning on that were saying, oh, I hope this guy fails because I wear a suit and tie every day. Vince and I'll throw my name in. Vince and Kevin have got jeans on and spaghetti on their shirt. Look at me. You know what I mean? And I've talked to Brad. I've had secret meetings. And there was not just him. There was another a guy we both care a lot about. Same ethnic background. They went out at night, did illegal drugs. You know what I mean? None of them. He never got piss tested after he became friends with Brad. Brad took a very big chance, I think, in my head, being the head of the department, snorting some shit with the guy. You know what I mean? So you were getting hit at all angles. My luck was we were beating Vince before the NWO. But when the NWO came in, I didn't start Scott, but I had him real young, okay? We were friends. Scott used to come to me and say, hey, how do you become a wrestler? So I had that rapport with Scott. Kevin and I went through every gimmick. I killed a monkey one time at the Oz. I could tell you that story. But we were Oz. Dusty had spent $100,000 for the backdrop. Here's a 7-foot guy that looks better than anybody in the business, and you want to put a cone hat on him. He's gonna be from a small town in France, the Coneheads, right? Yeah. So I had his backing, and Vince, I dumped so much heat on them that I became their darling. So I had them watching my back, even though Kevin and I had disagreements at some times, and I mean verbal disagreements. I had the two top guys, and then 6 who I knew before he was a wrestler. When he was working for Malenko, he used to come down to the sportatorium, take pictures. I had those 3 guys in my corner. Mm-hmm. So at that time, I had other guys, but at that time, that's all I needed. The guys that you had in your corner, not that they weren't any as big as stars, but they didn't have the clout. Jeff came in. He was your guy. Okay, Jeff could have done better, but it was the problem you had with Hulk. You know what I mean? You inherited the same problems, but you didn't, in my head, have the lifeboat I had. If I had a problem with Hogan, Nash and Hall are great manipulators. They're much smarter than Hogan in manipulation. I could go to Kevin and Scott and say, listen, guys, I got a real serious problem with Hulk. He wants to rewrite the TV tonight. Hey, let's rewrite one segment where he says, brother, I've been clanging and banging, in the Great White. Well, let's put that in. Make sure we get that in. Can you let him leave that alone? They would go in there on my behalf and do that. Where you didn't have, you had Jeff, and you had the guys, the young guys that you were pushing that didn't quite have that power. So I can understand, when you look back and you say, oh yeah, I was paranoid and it was my own fault. Yeah, me too. But you did have a bullseye on your back.
Yeah, yeah,
You were coming from there too. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And the other thing is, believe it or not, I do believe in this. I'm from the East Coast, like you said. You're from the East
Yep.
Coast. There's something about us
Oh yeah.
that runs people, aggravates
Oh
people.
yeah, no, Kevin, I say that all the time. Everybody, everybody's ready to jump on.
Yeah.
There's racism. There's racism in wrestling. The WWE hasn't had a black champion. Kevin, I swear to you, coming from New York and being Italian. I
Yeah.
was stereotyped from day one. People had this. People thought I was the character I played on TV. They thought that's what guys from the East Coast were. And bro, I was stereotyped from day one. People didn't like me just because of my accent, and I was Italian, and I talk with my hands.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I've had this house for 12 years. I live up in the islands, like I said, in the San Juan Islands. We live on the beach. Well, there is a house that was 5 houses away from me. And they're passive aggressive out here, okay? They're, either been here for multi generations or came from California, especially Northern California. So I had a Jerry Lee Lewis cassette in, and I was listening to it, and I was walking down the beach, and there was an old timer. He had one of those 1960 radios, and he had the earplug in, right? And he said to me, "Can you turn your music down so I can hear the game?" Now he's 5 houses away, right? I said, "You gotta be fucking shitting me." And he says to me, "I didn't know I was dealing with an animal." So I start talking to one of my neighbors. He's a friend. He says, "They don't understand. That's how you guys are." And the next sentence, you would have said, "Hey, do you need a beer?"
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right. That's right. Yep.
yeah, they just don't understand it. So, yeah, you had that on your back too, and especially what you got the same kind of introduction to WCW that Kevin and Scott did, but in a much harder sense.
Yeah.
Kevin and Scott, I'd have Sting, the Steiners, when they first came in, and I was dumping the heat on them. They'd say, "I think they came in here for Vince," and I'm saying to myself, "Well, this is fake, and we're putting the heat on them, and you guys are gonna come back later. Where do you get that?" And I heard that about you and Ed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I still hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that you came in a very difficult time, and I don't know if you realize this too. You came in when they had actually kind of hit the iceberg,
Yeah.
and they said, "Okay, Vinny, you can run this ship." Then they had the creative control department. AOL, when I had it, hadn't really came in and, "Oh, you can't do that. You
Yeah.
can't do this. It's no longer a foreign object. It's an international object." You know, this
Kevin,
scrutinized.
my favorite story, and I bet you don't know this story, because, Kevin, here was the things with standards and practices. Like, I knew there was a standards and practices department, so I know I had to, do my Q's and P's, but I had no idea what they would object to. You'll love this story, Kevin. So it was a show, and I remember I wanted Hall and Nash to show up drunk to the show.
Right.
And standards and practices, "Oh, no, we can't do this. They can't be drunk, blah, 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 blah." So I'm thinking, right? So, Kevin, I come up with the idea, and I go to standards and practices. Okay, how about this? How about if Kevin and Scott are sick, and they show up to the arena sick, and they're drinking cold medicine out of the bottle, and the more they drink, they're copping more and more. Bro, they're copping more and more. Bro, Kevin, I threw that out there for shits and giggles. Literally. You know what they said? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you could do that. That works. So I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. They can get high on cold medicine, but they can't drink it. It was it was the things they came up with that just blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did that too, Vince. And let me ask you if you think the same thing. I think they were doing that to justify their job, that they
Yeah,
could go back.
I agree. Yes, Kevin. Yes, yes. Kevin, do you know? Here's another one that I couldn't believe, bro. We had about 3 or 4 heavy set women come in, and we had Piper just cracking one liner after one liner after one liner, being Piper. Okay.
Right.
They called me in their offices. Kevin, this is a true conversation that took place. Vince, we can't have Roddy Piper insulting heavyset women. There may be some heavyset women at home watching the show. And bro, but that was the thing, Kevin. Like, I never knew what they were going to come up with. And, Kevin, here was the thing, bro. So they used to come out of left field with stuff. So, Kevin, here's what I said. Guys, give me a handbook. Give me a handbook. You can do this. You can't do that. You could do this. And I will follow the handbook. Well, Kevin, they never gave me a handbook, but they changed the rules every week.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a story, and you'll appreciate this. The guy's, I'm trying to remember his last name. The guy his first name was Brad. He was the head of the acquisition department for Ted Turner. When we were being bought by, Jimmy Crockett was selling to Ted, a lot of the wrestlers treated him poorly. And I thought, well, that isn't my nature anyway. And I thought, well, it's going to go. I could see the picture, the writing on the wall. Jimmy ain't going to stay in business. That's what guys were thinking. So I treated him very nicely. About 3.5, 4 years later, Janie was your secretary too. Janie buzzed me and says, there's a Brad, and I can't, it's on the tip of my tongue. Brad said to see you. So he comes in and he says, my friend, you're going to have a problem. And I said, what do you mean I'm going to have a problem? He said, this merger's ass backwards. It should have been Turner and Warner Brothers taking over AOL. He said, you're going to have somebody in your playpen, and it won't be too long. I said, what do you mean someone in my playpen? He said, they're going to have somebody in your playpen, and inside of 6 weeks, they'll be telling you, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? 2 weeks later, I'm in the production meeting. I'm going over everything, and I see a guy in the corner. And I go to Craig Leathers, and I said, who's that guy? He said, he's from AOL. He's looking for anything that isn't right to go on TV. I got the same thing. They were saying, you can't do that, you can't do that. And I said the same thing to him, Vince. I said, what can I do? Right. Can you give me a list and I'll follow it?
Yeah.
No. Every week it will change because that's the mood of the country. I think we've become, especially back then, Vince, we've become so sensitive to anything. God. I mean, when you were growing up, if you went into an Irish neighborhood, they were going to insult you, call you names. Same way with us. We go to East Boston to pick up some, cannolis or something. They're gonna insult the shit out of us. Do you know what you end up by? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not a hot dog, but they made it impossible for you. They really did. Yeah. And they got stronger when you were in there. Yeah. They got a lot.
Kevin, I want to ask you this, bro. Listen. Kevin, for 17 years now. Well, no, actually I left my WCW contract was over in 2001, whenever it was, but for 15 years, whatever. Kevin, I've heard for 15 years, and I'm sure you've heard it too, Vince Russo killed WCW. I mean, that has followed me for 15 years. And Kevin, like, I don't even want you to confirm that or deny that. But Kevin, I have a conspiracy theory, and I want to see if you and I are on the same page.
Right.
Are you ready for this?
Right, right.
Okay, I think there was one culprit who killed WCW. And I've been
Okay.
saying it for years, Kevin. You know who I think killed WCW? I want to see if you agree with me.
Who's that?
I think Disco Inferno.
Disco
I
Inferno.
think Disco killed WCW single-handedly. I think when Disco was on the TV, millions and millions and millions of television sets at home were turned off. Would you
Right.
would you agree with that?
You know, I like disco personally, but I never got the gimmick. You know, and here's the thing. I created Goldberg and you created Austin. I mean, how far off the mark is that? You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
and again, one of your buddies, you know, he's your buddy, you know.
Disco, I don't want to have nothing to do with him anymore, Kevin. Nothing to do with him.
No, but I don't mean Disco.
Oh.
I mean one of your buddies
Oh, boy.
was always pushing him.
Yeah.
You know, we have to have entertainment. We have to have entertainment. But, you know, I just didn't get it, Vince. I just didn't get
I
it.
still don't get him. I still don't get him, Kevin.
And then he said that he wanted to wrestle an invisible
An
man.
invisible man. You ever hear such a thing?
No.
Kevin, I got to tell you, I read something this morning, and I was very surprised, Kevin, and I want to ask you about this. Kevin, listen, man, when I literally, as a shoot, Kevin, I don't know if you remember or not, but literally, you know, in the Phillips Arena, I got a bad concussion. And, bro, it was a simple Russian leg sweep Flair gave me. I didn't know what I was doing. Anybody can go watch it. I went back. I hit the back of my head.
Right.
Kevin, I was really, really suffering from post-concussion syndrome, vertigo. It was horrible. I had to go to a specialist. This went on for a really long time. So, Kevin, I was totally checked out when the sale happened. I was nowhere to be found. But, Kevin, I read online today, and I was really surprised to hear this, that you parted ways with WCW before WWE bought the company?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I had no idea, Kevin. What happened?
They brought us into a room with Brad Siegel, and they said, and this is after, I don't want finger poking, beating Goldberg, you know what I mean? And we're doing this on live TV, not pay-per-views.
Right.
And Brad comes in and says, what's the next epic idea? Like it was a movie. And I remember JJ saying, hey, let me tell you the story about Goldberg. We didn't know what he was going to be. We didn't know what we were going to call him. He had he hadn't had a shaved head yet. He was dressed like Atlanta Falcon, you know, jersey on and that kind of thing. I think Brad knew he was going to sell this to his frat brother. I really do, way back then. So I go back, and this is when you could book anywhere. They allowed us to, and this is when I knew there was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not in the office. How do they know I'm not at the bar or,
Right.
you know, out fishing?
Yeah.
So when you weren't there, Ed was still there, and Ed and I went to Key Largo. I lived at Isla Morada, the next island, and Ed and I were booking, and I got a phone call, and it was Brad, and he said, you don't need to show up in Denver or Albuquerque. And I said, do you need me for anything else? He said, no, I don't. Now, here's the crazy thing. I had just signed 2 weeks before a 3-year contract. They had to pay me for 36 more months. And you were there at the very end. Don't you think that was a conspiracy with Brad and the other guy? They gave that library away.
Yeah.
What would that library today be worth to Vince?
Oh my
Uh,
God, please.
you know,
But Kevin, like, I mean, basically, you don't need to show up to Albuquerque. No
No.
reason, no nothing.
no reason, no nothing. No reason, no nothing.
I did not know that. I thought you were there till the end.
No, and the crazy thing is, you would have thought they would have at least try to make my life miserable. You know what I mean?
Right.
And though that's what was wrong with the whole thing, and you know it, Vince. There was nobody checking anybody. Everybody was running free. Wouldn't you have checked and said, before I make this phone call, how many months does this guy have left?
Of course.
Bring him down the power plant. Have him sweep the
Right.
bedrooms or whatever.
Right.
They just didn't follow through. And they sent me home. And, for 3 years, here comes the paycheck every week. And I'm out fishing. And with that paycheck, I was able to build my gym,
Yeah. Now, Kevin, was there any conversations at all with the possibility of you going over there to WWE, or at that point were you kind of like, you know what, I'm going to go move on and do other things?
No, I'll tell you a story that not many people know. I don't talk about it. One day, we lived in the water there, and I used to go get some lobsters. So one day it was early, like 11 o'clock, and I'm getting some lobsters, and my wife yells out, Vince McMahon's on the phone. I said, bull. And she says, well, he says he's Vince McMahon. And she gets on the phone, and she says to me, the guy will wait for you, whoever it is. I come on, and it's Vince McMahon. So we start talking, and he came up and said to me, what do you think about Hulk Hogan? And how did you use him? I said, let me tell you about Hulk. You got him now, and to me, he's Ali at this point of his career.
Right.
We saw Ali, his last 6 fights, he never knocked anybody out, and some of them were questionable, but we looked the other way because he was Ali.
Right.
Okay? And then I said, if I was running it, I put the belt on him for a while and then do something very hot to hurt him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy that hurts him is going to get a hell of a rub. So I actually laid that finish out where he won the belt.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, maybe I'm going to get the call. Next thing is, he said, well, after that Monday night, they didn't do it exactly like I said it, but the motorcycles with Undertaker, where he drug him around on the back.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I said, that's when he was American Badass. I said, yeah, go ahead and do that, but I want him drawn and quartered, like there was 2 bikes trying to pull him besides the Undertaker.
Yeah.
You could have got Percy on a scooter, for Christ's sake, or a bicycle, But I made probably the ultimate mistake. He called me when Rock went to wrestle Hogan. Mm-hmm. And I said, this was the worst town you could pick. When Hogan's run was done with Paul Orndorff, you thought you were going to draw about 10,000, 20,000 people in Toronto. You did 70,000. Mm-hmm. This is his town. I said, they're going to boo Rock out of the building. He said, no, they won't. And they did. Mm-hmm. I never heard from him again after that.
Kevin, do you with everything you've done and everything you've accomplished, do you ever have any regrets of not working there and not working for him, just to see what it was like, if nothing else?
Yes, I do. I don't have many regrets, but I would like to see how he organizes stuff, because Vinny, if you go back in the Wayback Machine, Eddie Graham kind of taught me in the book, but I was lucky one day at the old Philly Arena where they filmed the Rocky, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we used to do the TV. I was coming in early, and there weren't many people, and Vince Sr. had gone to the bathroom, and all his cronies were somewhere. And I happened to go, which I shouldn't have done, but I went and looked at his book. And he had a year booked out,
Wow.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And it was guys that weren't even in, like Brody hadn't come in yet, and he had 2 matches with Bruno. Then Hansen had 3 matches with Bruno. Then he had Stasiak, who had been a champion, 1 match. Bobby Duncan, 1 match. A couple of the Sheik, 3 matches. I'm saying to myself, well, the next thing I know, he's right behind me. And I about shit. So he says, what are you looking at? I said, I just don't understand how you can do this when the guys aren't even here. What are you going to do? He said, well, I have an idea who Bruno's going to wrestle. I have an idea this is when Backlund was going to be the champion. I'm going to bring Bob Backlund in for 18 months, get him over. I knew I'm going to change the tag belts 3 different times, and I'm going to get this. He had everything figured out, and he said,
Wow.
do you want to sit down and watch what I do? So for about a month, and I got all kinds of heat with Monsoon and Arnold and all that. But he kind of showed me,
Wow.
and then I realized he, again, that was a territory, even though it was the biggest one. He had the brains enough to go to the end of the book and then come forward.
Yeah.
So, do I ever regret that? Yes, because I would like to see how Vince operated.
Yeah.
And you were there with him. You were his right-hand man.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was that lineal like his father or if he
where I'm hearing some of the similarities, Kevin, is, bro, all Vince cared about were the guys on top. What's Austin doing? What's The Rock doing? Everybody else he left up to me and Ed. So, I mean, literally, he always just cared about. I think that's why they're having a problem now of getting mid-card guys over. Vince just never, bro, if you weren't on top, he had no concern for you. So, Kevin, I got to ask you this question, man, because now I'm going to start getting into this creative mind. Because we could sit here all day and talk about everything you've accomplished in the business. No, I got to get in this creative mind.
Okay.
Everybody, when you say Kevin Sullivan to somebody, and if you're a wrestling fan and if you're breathing, immediately what comes to mind is, the Taskmaster and this dark guy and Satan, and the Dungeon of Doom. That's what you think about immediately. So one would have to think, okay, wait a minute now. Is there really a dark side to Kevin Sullivan? Right. Does Kevin Sullivan have to draw that from somewhere? But Kevin, let me tell you something, bro. Here's the part that I think a lot of people missed, which was my favorite part of your career. As a matter of fact, Kevin, I'm working with a new school here in Colorado, and I said to these guys, you need to go watch this on YouTube. You need to go watch this on YouTube. Bro, one of the greatest gimmicks, angles, whatever you want to call it, my top 5 of all time, the Varsity Club, which I thought was absolutely tremendous. So now I'm sitting here and I'm saying, wait a minute. This devil, demon, monster, Taskmaster had a completely different side. That the Varsity Club was freaking hilarious. So so now I'm saying to myself, okay, so the dark side, it's all a work. This is the mind of Kevin Sullivan, that he can go from A to Z, because you would not have think the same guy booked that stuff.
Right.
So now I gotta ask you, Kevin, is there a little bit of a dark side you ever draw from?
Well, here's the thing, Vince. I read a lot, and I've been to Asia quite a bit. And like when I used to say Buddha Dean, right? He was a fertility god, a Hindu fertility god. You know what I mean? So I do study I like to study different religions, how they're very similar, where they all came from. You know what I mean? How the not just religions but history, like the Babylonians enslaving the Jews going to Egypt. I mean, I'm really into that. So if you and when I was doing that gimmick, MTV first started. So there was Billy Idol, there was Michael Jackson being a werewolf, So and then I was at a horror movie freak,
Hmm.
So I got a lot from that. But the thing about the varsity club to me that worked so well, that still kind of kept me in character. Here's these all American boys. It's almost like uh, the Duke lacrosse team.
Oh yeah.
Remember?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. So it's like here's these all American and legit all American guys. And then there's a guy in there in singlets and, they Letterman jackets. Some of them had medals on. And here's a guy with a black robe, right? So my subliminal thing was take it what you want, but this guy was going to take them to the after hour joints. He was going to introduce them to ladies of the
Yeah.
evening.
Right.
You
Right.
know, he was his plan was he was going to go on their notoriety, but if they got in trouble, oh, don't blame me. You're a big boy. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right.
And then with the Steiner thing, Steiner was so. I always say I had, you know, Curly, Shemp, and Mo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the Shemp was Mike Rotendo, an unkept Shemp. So and he was always whining. So it worked perfectly,
Great.
perfectly.
Kevin, I gotta ask you something, and this is a little like this might be a little touchy for you,
Okay.
but I think you'll appreciate talking about this.
I,
And I'm asking you for it, Kevin. Listen, I think you know I'm not that dirt guy. Like I'm gonna get the headline from Sullivan. I ain't that guy. I don't care
oh,
about that. This
yeah,
is stuff I'm curious about. And
yeah.
you experienced a lot of the things that I experienced.
Right,
I found out right away, Kevin, right away. If you have a situation in the back that is a shoot,
right,
and you have guys professional enough that will work the shoot, and it
right,
doesn't happen a lot, bro. It doesn't
right,
happen a lot. But when you have guys professional enough that'll work the shoot, it's gold. Like, it's
right.
gold. So that was one of the toughest parts of me as a booker was something would be going on in real life. I'll give you my scenario, Kevin.
Okay.
Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett. Jeff was sleeping around with Karen. Kurt
Uh,
knew they were working with it in the same company. And Kevin, as a booker, I'm sitting back licking my chops.
yeah,
Because it's all over the internet, everybody. I'm like, man, if I can get these guys to work together and play this out in front of people, it'll be gold. Because, Kevin, at that point, even though they're pros and they're working together, they're really not acting. So the people buy into it and the people believe it. So
right.
when I had situations like that, it was gold. Bro, you had a couple of situations
Yeah,
like that. You had the situation with Benoit. You had the
right,
situation with Pillman. And
right.
both of them were gold. I mean, Pillman was maybe one of the greatest angles of all time. Now, I want to ask you, Kevin, as the creative behind both of those situations, as it's running through your mind, was there ever the, oh no, I can't do that. Like, I can't do that. I can't go there. I can't do that. Or was there, we got to go there. This is absolute money. And how did you go about getting everybody on board?
Okay, with the Pillman thing that was his idea, Vinny. He was a brilliant, brilliant guy.
Yeah.
I mean, uh, we would have never talked about feuds if Brian had lived. Brian Pillman and Stone Cold Austin would have been the feud of 2 decades, okay?
Yeah.
Not only losing a great worker, we lost a great mind. He used to call me up and saying, I'll just use his name. Stevie Ray told me to kick your ass. I said, that's funny. 5 minutes before that, he told me to kick your ass,
Right,
okay?
right, right.
So, and one of the biggest compliments I ever got in the wrestling business, Nash told me that the dressing room bought the pay-per-view and went to a hotel and watched it, okay?
Yeah.
With the Nancy and Benoit thing, there's a story that I haven't told. A lot of people, my close friends, know. I wasn't living with Nancy for 6 months. We had separated. And, it wasn't that I didn't know if we were going to get a divorce. I didn't know where we were going. I was living in the Keys. She was living in Daytona. And with Benoit, he had just had a baby, so I said, nah, nothing can happen here, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that I was protecting my end, I was kind of protecting his end, you know what I'm saying? If you just had, wife just had a baby 2 weeks prior to the angle, I don't think anything's going to happen. But as I saw it going, I happen to like Benoit. I put the world belt on him when everybody said not to, right? Mm-hmm. And then he walked out on me the next night because I was going to screw him. I had put the belt on the cruiserweight on Dean, and I was fixing to put the tag belts on Sat and Shane Douglas. I understood, now I understand the symbiotic relationship that the guys should have worked together. They were all demanding to work on top, but they were getting, we'll say, 350, and what those other guys are getting. They're getting $3 million. Mm-hmm. So you had to do it too. How do you go to the bean counter and say, well, I didn't put the $3 million guy on the card, I put the 350, Yep. So there's a lot of hoops you had to jump through. But with Benoit, at that time I saw something in him. There was like the Dynamite Kid all over again, who had never had national exposure. The kid was a hard worker. None of them ever phoned anything in, but he just had that it quality. Even though he couldn't talk a lick, he made up for his work. So I actually brought them into the office and I said, I want to make sure everybody's aboard, because here's the thing. I'm not living with her now, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't want her to think, oh, this guy's a smart ass or he's trying to do something. So I said to them, this is what I like to do. If anybody has any reservations, let's call it quits. You know what I mean? And they all jumped on it and they said, yeah, let's do it. And then, whatever transpired. But I had more people talk about those two angles, of course, than the other one. And believe it or not, I've had more people talk about the Pillman angle because they still ask me, was that real?
Yeah. Kevin, I got to ask you this, bro. I got to ask you, and you were working with him at the time. Now, Kevin, I had the honor and the privilege of working with him right before he died. So I saw it. I saw exactly what you're talking about. But Kevin, let's be honest. For years and years and years, this is flying Brian Pillman in the tiny, tight trunks. Did you see that other guy, Kevin? Did you know that other guy existed?
Yeah, because here's the thing. Brian gave up alcohol, but I saw him at a bar a couple of times. And there was that snap side, that loose cannon side. And he was very witty, and not even at bars, at like a 7-Eleven, he'd come across, with a real witty mark. I didn't see it that big.
Yeah,
Which would be,
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and the thing is, Vince, he came to me one time, and when he said this to me, it blew me over because I knew he was right. You remember when Cincinnati got in the Super Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he used to go to the sidelines. Okay, he said to me, "I'm going to do something that's going to shock the wrestling world." I said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "During the match, when the ball's at the other end, I'm going to run out with a chain, strip naked, and tie myself to the goalpost and lock it with 6 chains." Now, now, even if they stayed away from it,
Yeah.
it would have made the front
Oh
page.
my God, they would have been talking about it today.
Yeah, they would have put him away for 90 days observation. He was willing to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how far out his
Jeez.
thinking
Yeah.
was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And hey, let's face it, that episode with the gun, a lot of people
Oh.
say, well, gun violence and all this. Well, they don't say that in movies, right?
Right.
So that hit them like that was a shoot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it was brilliant, and the way Austin pulled it off, it was brilliant too.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, you used a very interesting word there, and I use it all the time. You said it. The good old it factor. And I'm from the school, you either have it or you don't. You can't teach it. You can't buy it. And when somebody's got it, you know it. And when they don't, you know it. Now, I want to ask you, of all the great people you've worked with, okay, I'm going to ask you 2 case scenarios. Tell me the guy that you saw the it in that nobody else did. Like, who was the guy that, like, they're missing the boat on this guy, they're missing the boat on this guy, they're missing the boat on this guy, and maybe eventually got the opportunity, or maybe never did get the opportunity? Who would be that one guy that you came across?
I'll tell you who missed the boat on him was me. I beat Goldberg the first time on Nitro TV. Nobody remembers that.
Wow.
He used to wear the Atlanta jacket, right? The Atlanta red tights, and it was an angle he did with Steve McMichaels, of all people, over a Super Bowl ring. And he got beat. And I said, whoa, just his presence. I said, whoa, did I make a mistake?
You knew right then and there, Kevin, right there?
Right then, I said, God, and Mike Graham was there. I said, Mike, you got to do me a favor. I said, Mike was going at the power plant too. I said, will you talk to this guy after I talk to him? I want him to, he had the little ring of hair that I probably would if I wasn't shaved. I said, he's got to get it off. We got to make him a Mike Tyson, the black tights and black boots. Plus, I was cloning your thing with Austin, right? He was our Austin. I said, and we're going to cover up the fact he can't work by going a minute and a half. We're going to give him a finish, the tackle and the finish for the football, right? I went back to the first football player one of the first anyway, Gus Sonnenberg, will use that as his finish. I said, let's go do that, but add something else to it. I made a mistake there, yeah, without question, And Vinny, you know this. I was lucky enough to be around Eddie Graham, and a guy would walk into a territory. See, no matter who the booker was in Florida, on Tuesday nights, Eddie was the booker. You know what I mean? You sat in the room with him and listened. He would lay out these finishes. But if a new guy came into the territory, and even if Eddie didn't know him, when the guy walked into the territory, opened his bag, set his stuff up, Eddie would say, this guy's going to draw money. This guy's not. It was, you talk about the it factor. It was, he walked in the room. He didn't go, it's funny. Let me just tell you real quick. You go to these little independent shows, right? The lower pecking order is in one corner. The logic guys working on their company that's been there longer is in a different section, and then the guys that come in are on to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
When a guy back in those days, when a guy would walk into the dressing room, grab a chair, put it in the middle, and he was making a claim. It was like a dog pissing in. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This is my spot, brother, and I'm the new dog in town, and you know it, Vinny. You know right away. So yeah, the guy that I missed was Goldberg.
Now
yeah.
let's look at the other side of the coin. You
Right.
know, Kevin, did you think there was a can't miss guy that
Yes.
for whatever reason, who would that
Yes.
be?
Luger.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Luger got trained in Florida.
Right.
Okay. Hiro Matsuda trained him. He got the first contract ever in the wrestling business. I don't know if you're aware of that, Vince.
I am not. No.
Okay, he got a $365,000 a day from Jimmy Crockett. Okay, he was paid on potential for his whole career, even before that. And I love Lex. University of Miami, he got thrown out of there. Went to Penn State. Went to the Packers. Then he went to Tampa Bay Bandits. Nothing ever clicked. When Luger came to Florida and he got through training, they put the South, and I wasn't the booker then. Hiro Matsuda was for a very short time. 2 weeks after he got there, he beat the great Wahoo McDaniels. You know what I mean? And Wahoo, you look at if you were there or if they could look at the tape, you can see he didn't want to do the job. You know what I mean? He wanted to make him look bad.
Yeah.
And then Luger climbing out of the cage with Brody. I was there. There were just things. And then, you would know this better than I. Vince spends all this money on the Lex Express
Yeah.
and all that. And he goes to WrestleMania. And correct me if I'm wrong, does he usually have DQs and double countouts or a countout? He got all the way there. And he didn't believe in it at the end.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's a guy that made a shitload of money. And the only time that I remember him drawing a house, and again, he was probably caught in a situation too, because eventually, no matter how much heat a heel gets, you got to put the baby face over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they built him up in Charlotte when they went on that Great American Bash tour. It was like, I think we did like 76 nights in a row around the country. And he was probably on the main event with Flair for half them. And if there was one in Baltimore, he had him on the rack. I actually talked the commissioner, Chester O'Sullivan, to leave early, and he pulled his guys because he couldn't get blood in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. He had him in the rack, and he was bleeding, and they stopped the match as Rick is giving up, and they award the match to Flair. He just, I don't know if it was just that match, but he never seemed, in my opinion, and you were probably there with him in WWE, right?
Yeah.
He just, there was something about his face, too, that you didn't even, if he was a babyface, you didn't like him that much, and if he was a heel, you really didn't hate him.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, we have to turn to today's product. Okay. Kevin, this is the easiest way for me to sum this up. Kevin, now you got to imagine, people want to know. Kevin, we all book differently, and this is why I respect other bookers. I respect them for a lot of reasons. First of all, Kevin, in wrestling, there's no right way or wrong way.
No.
There's a million ways to do things, okay? And here's my deal. Like, I understand everybody's wrestling philosophy is different depending on what they grew up in and what they watched. So I had the privilege of working with guys like, you know, a Jerry Jarrett or a Bill Watts or a Dusty or even an Eric Bischoff to some extent, a you, where they came from all different territories, and I was able to sit back and I understood what their wrestling philosophy is. I grew up a WWWF guy. So I grew up on the entertainment aspect. Right. So, Kevin, the very first time I put on, I'm switching through the TV channels. I'm probably about a 9-year-old kid or so. Kevin, I switched the channel, never saw wrestling before. My very first image were the Valiant Brothers and Lou Albano. And I stopped dead in my tracks. Right. And I was mesmerized by these guys. Hence my love and my career in professional wrestling. Okay? Right. And that career, Kevin, went up through my 20s, through my 30s. I was working well into my 40s, you know, and even my 50s. Right. Kevin, here's the easiest way I can explain it. If I tuned into wrestling for the very first time today, if I never watched wrestling, and this Monday night I put on Raw, and it's the first wrestling show I watch, I know I would not be a wrestling fan. I would not be drawn to the wrestling I see today, and I'll tell you why. Kevin, I think the foundation of wrestling is very important. Now, I think we can tweak, we can evolve, we can make better. You know, bro, you're wearing your Red Sox jersey. I'm a huge San Francisco Giant fan. My father was a New York Giant fan. But, like, here's a perfect example. We're going to have instant replay now. So, you know, to me, that was a great tweak to the game. That was an evolvement of the game. That didn't change the game.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, Kevin, the three fundamentals. If you build the foundation of wrestling, here are the three fundamentals that I saw since 1970. Number one, you got to have characters. You got to have characters. The characters need to be different. You need to understand the characters. Number two, you've got to put those characters in the storyline, into a storyline. And number three, you have to believe the fight is real. So the psychology of the wrestling match is everything. You got to suspend the disbelief. The fight is real. Kevin, somehow, some way, when I look at Raw on Monday night, all three of those very basic elements of professional wrestling are no longer there. There's no characters. There's no stories. And they're working this style where nobody sells, and it doesn't look like anybody's trying to win the match. It doesn't look like a fight. That is my opinion. I would love to hear your spin on professional wrestling in 2016.
Well, Vinny, you hit it on the head, okay? To me, when you turned on at 9 years old, you turned on that TV, and the Valiant Brothers and Lou Albano, and then you stayed watching it. Mm-hmm. You watched the circus, because if you didn't like the Fire Eaters, the Trap Eater artist was coming out that. And if you didn't like that, for comic relief, the clowns were going to come out of the car. But the real thing that got you at the end of the show, Gunther Gabriel Williams grabbed that lion's head, and we're all hoping that lion would chop his fucking head off, right?
Right.
And it was that simple. That was the formula. Right. I grew up watching WWE, okay? Albano and Altamore. I mean, I had wrestled amateurs, so I knew, you know, it was cartoonish. Right. I'll tell you how a story I thought it was cartoonish until somebody walked down the aisle. Okay, so, you know, they do the old thing, get hooked up in the ropes, the Altamore and Carrion take them and batter ram them, okay? Then I watched the Chief getting Strongbow getting the shit kicked out of him, Yeah, he knows the European restaurant in East Boston is closing. Oh, I gotta get there. I gotta get my pie. I gotta get the pie. So we know that, okay? Then, to me, if anybody said to me, who is the epitome walking to the ring that everybody knows is the world heavyweight champion, and there's been some great ones, Bruno Sammartino. You could be a blind man and know he was the world champion.
Right.
He walks to the ring. This is my first time, right? He walks to the ring, and I'm saying, wow, it's entertaining. I'm enjoying it. They got some moves that are legitimate because they also had Dory Dixon. I don't know if you remember the name.
That I don't remember.
He used to come in once in a while from Mexico. He was a high flyer. Okay. And Dickie Steinborn was in. And they had this incredible match like it would have been in the South. You know what I mean? It was a Southern type match. And then later on they have the tag team, but Bruno walks down. And when Bruno walks down, I know this is on. I'm saying, well, I want to see if this is real or not. All of a sudden, the doors fly open on the other end, and the building actually moved. You know, the vibration. Yeah. The Sheik comes out. Habata, haba, haba, haba. He hits that ring. You know, he's got the do-rag on. It flies off. He grabs Bruno. He's spiking Bruno. Bruno makes a comeback, beats him to death, kicks him. The Sheik's throwing chairs. Then they do a finish that, to this day, I haven't seen them do in 30 years. To come back, you know, they can't beat Bruno, right?
Right.
But they do this finish where the Sheik and him have a big collision, and Bruno goes over the top, but as he goes over the top, his leg goes through the middle rope and the top rope, so he's hanging upside down, and he's getting counted out because he's out of the ring. The Sheik comes up, they have a double knockout, but as Sheik goes on the mat, Bruno goes over the top, but he puts his leg in between the middle rope, so when he takes the bump, he's hanging upside down. The referee starts to count him because technically he's out of the ring. The Sheik gets up at 9. Bruno's counted out, and I said, okay. The Sheik comes out and takes the pencil or breaks, you know, that I didn't know it was a pencil at the time. I thought it was an international object. So he starts stabbing him in the head, and Bruno's bleeding. And I'm saying, my God, they're going to send somebody out here to chase the Sheik off. They sent Pugliese, and they sent Dominic Tanucci was first to. You know, the two Italians saving the Italian, right? Yeah. So he gets them, lays them out. Here comes Spirizarion, the Greek god. He comes out. He gets laid out. The chief comes out. He's probably got a pie in the back. Now, he comes out. He laid him out. Then the Sheik goes crazy, and he runs through the audience. People are running, you know, like an atom bomb's going to explode. And I'm up in the second balcony, and I say to myself, I hope he doesn't come up here. You know? And I went home believing that everything I saw up until that point was either choreographed somehow, or maybe it wasn't fixed all the way, but they were making sure they could work the next week. Yeah. Bruno, I thought was going to end up to the hospital for a month.
Yeah.
And I thought the Sheik was the baddest man on the planet. You know what I mean? I said, Jesus Christ, I hate to meet him in a dark alley. And that's Vince. I have this today, okay? And this is no disrespect to any of those young guys, okay?
Right, of course.
No disrespect. You and I are in a bar. We're having a couple of Heinekens. We say, okay, let's go. Where's the car? It's parked down here in the alleyway. You and I go down the street. We turn to go down the alleyway. Brock Lesnar's walking on one side of the street. Ambrose is walking on the other side of the street. I'm going to walk on Ambrose's side of the street.
Right.
even at this age, I know I got a chance.
Right.
This monster, I don't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I think they've kind of lost people. In my head, and you were up there, so I'm going to ask you this question. How can they have a guy that's going to have a real fight against a real tough Samoan? Hunt is tough, okay? Here's the thing people don't understand. I believe he's won his last 8 fights.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to... Why isn't he the world heavyweight champion? He beat The Undertaker. What did that mean if he beat The Undertaker?
Yeah.
Shouldn't he be the flag bearer for the company? Shouldn't people say, this is the world's champion, just like I said about Bruno? Brock looks like the world heavyweight wrestling champion. And no disrespect to Ambrose, but...
Kevin, you know what though? Here's what I don't understand, and I want you to help me with this. Okay. Here's my concern. First of all, Monday night when you were working over there and I was working over there, combined, over 10 million people were watching wrestling on Monday nights. Okay, right now we're looking at about 3 million. So somehow along the way, we've lost 7 million. Bro, they could tell you it's social media, it's DVR, it's this and that. You know why that's bullshit, bro? I'll tell you why. Because between hour 2 and 3 of Raw every week, bro, sometimes they lose 600,000 viewers in an hour. So if their theory is correct, that would mean... they're watching it on TV from 9 to 10, and at 10 o'clock, 600,000 people are going to watch it on their phone. It's bullshit. They've lost the casual audience. Here's part of my theory, Kevin, and I think you'll appreciate this. In my mind, if you're a casual wrestling fan, not on these internet sites, not obsessed with the business, I think in your mind, you have an idea or a picture of what a wrestler looks like. Because you've been watching with your grandfather, you've been watching with your father, and every wrestler you watched as a kid, just like you said, you're at home saying, I would never want to piss that guy off. That guy would kick my freaking ass. That's what you would say. Now, Kevin, here's the argument people will give you. Well, there's a wellness policy now. The guys can't get as big. Bro, you just brought up Chief Jay Strongbow. Bro, I brought up the Valiant Brothers. These were not muscle head freaks. Kevin Sullivan was not a big jacked up guy. These were characters. You looked like a wrestler. I sit back and I watch wrestling now like you, Kevin. I'm like, I'm 55 years old. I literally think I could take 10% of the WWE roster. They don't look like wrestlers.
I say you could take 25.
What happened, Kevin? But what happened?
I'm going to tell you this bullshit about the wellness policy, okay? My family has been in boxing over almost 200 years. My great uncle is John L. Sullivan, 3 greats. John L. Sullivan, the first gloved heavyweight champion, last bare knuckle, okay? My cousin Tom McNeely fought Floyd Patterson for the title. His son fought Tyson when he came out of prison. Remember Peter McNeely?
Yeah.
Fought Tyson? Okay. So my dad was an amateur. He was the light heavyweight champion of New England, beat Tom's dad. So my dad took me to see wrestling one time. You know why he went? To see Don Leo Jonathan. That was way before steroids. And my dad said, this guy is a physical specimen. And when Don Leo went to the ring, he was a giant. He wasn't jacked up on steroids. And here's the thing, Vince. I know this wellness policy and all this shit, but they almost got it now where these supplements are almost as good as steroids. I'm not saying we want to go back to the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk, say your prayers and take your vitamins bullshit. But God damn it, I want to see a champion without a T-shirt on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
When you go to a UFC fight, does anybody wear a T-shirt? No. And that's what, you know how you said that, where did the 10 million fans go? And I think you're being kind that's all we've lost, because I believe it's a little bit higher than that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They went to UFC because that looks more like wrestling than this shit looks like wrestling.
Yeah.
And this is no disrespect to the boys. I was just on a Ring of Honor show, okay? This is a surprise. These kids, to me, look more like athletes than the WWE guys. They work, a little bit different. They got this Jay Lethal and the Briscoes. I don't know where they learned to talk. They're like Raymond. They know how to talk. But if you look in this, there's my question to you. You said that Vince doesn't care about anything but the main event guys. Is he in a panic now that he's throwing shit against the wall hoping it would stick, when he needs to just look at Brock and saying, okay, and Roman Reigns, whatever that was about, him getting suspended, was that to prove that they do a wellness policy because the guy ain't drawing in their head, and that's a way to put him in his place? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they gave him a 30-day suspension because it could be something. Here's the thing I don't buy about this wellness policy, and maybe I'm wrong. If you go to a fucking store, excuse my language, you go to a store, okay, and you go to a health food store. It says health first, and I buy a supplement. Do I have to be a scientist to figure out, well, that could act like a precursor to testosterone? Okay, isn't it funny that he got popped when everybody's complaining that he's not drawing? Yeah. That's my thing. I mean, I know there are guys up there that may be related by marriage to him that aren't clean. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've been around it my whole life. You've been around it. Yeah. You know. Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. But you hit it on the head. Storylines, characters, and wrestling. Yeah. And they have to look like a wrestler. I mean,
Kevin, you know what I say all the time? Like, people like us, I've been on Austin's show a couple of times, and people like us, bro, we're now the old grizzly vets because the wrestling business has evolved and this and that. Bro, if I hear evolution of the wrestling business, no, baseball has evolved for the better. Right. Wrestling has not evolved because the numbers have gone in the shitter. So whatever you're doing is not working. If I hear one of these young punks use the word evolve one more time, Kevin, you know what the problem is? People like me, people like you, people like Austin, I could sit here and name a million people. We grew up on professional wrestling, and in our mind, professional wrestling looks like something. We're going to see the character. We're going to get the story. We're going to get the fight. That's wrestling to us. Right. You can go out there today and do whatever you want, flip, flop, and fly. Yeah. Nobody's selling. And, bro, here's the thing. It never looks like anybody's trying to win the match, ever. It looks like everybody's trying to get their shit in. My thing is, bro, if you guys want to do that, okay, it's cool with us. Just don't call it professional wrestling. Because it's not. I mean, call it something else. That is not professional wrestling. Kevin, listen, in baseball, they made it better by implementing an instant replay. Okay, bro? They didn't add a base, or they didn't take away the outfield wall. They improved on the game.
Can I just interrupt you because we're both huge baseball fans, right? Yeah. I like the instant replay, okay? Yeah. They got to speed it up a little. But other than that, did they decide to only go 3 minutes and then have Big Papi talk about his retirement tour for 20 minutes in Kansas City and Anaheim and San Francisco and every other place he goes. Well, I like to say this. I'm from a small town, and today I got 520 home runs, but I know by the end of the time, God damn it, play ball, play ball. Let's play ball. And here's my analogy. Okay, do away with you and I go to Fenway Park, right? But 20 years ago or 17 years ago, they got rid of the Red Sox. They got rid of the Pawtucket Red Sox. They got rid of the Portland, Maine Red Sox. Now it's the Salem Red Sox where the kids out of high school and college, right? You and I are sitting there paying $9 for a 7-ounce beer. And I turn to you and I say, hey, Vinny, this second baseman's not bad. He's only made 12 errors in the last 6 games. Mm-hmm. They got nothing to analyze it with. Mm-hmm. They think all this shit is great, that it's evolved. No, let me ask you this. Has boxing evolved? It's punching and, winning.
Right.
Has UFC gone into cartoons? No, it's guys that walk down the aisle. I have a good friend of mine, bless his heart, I want to throw a shout out to his soul. Kimbo Slice died, okay? Kimbo one time said something very, very nice to me on, after he won a fight, they said, who's your favorite wrestler? He said, I grew up in Florida, and I liked the bad guys, Kevin Sullivan. So, Kimbo, he was a work, too. Kimbo had not an athletic scholarship, an academic scholarship to University of Miami. Suppose he lived in a car. He didn't live in a car. He lived in Liberty City. Tough place, but he did live. But he didn't come to the ring with a T-shirt on. You know what I mean? He came. That's what the difference is. And he wasn't doing bang, 1-2, kick out, 1-2. If I see 1-2, kick out.
God,
here's the thing I saw.
Kevin, they kick out of 20. They kick out of 20 high spots, and they end the match in a roll-up. They end the match.
I was going to say the same thing. Let me tell you something. I went to Ring of Honor, and I was very impressed with the guys. Okay, they shake hands. It's a whole different thing, but it's an athletic contest. They try to make it an athletic contest. They got some very good talent. They got a kid, Moose, who's very good. But I was involved in this match with Steve Carino and B.J. Whitaker, okay? They actually did a hard way, okay? So I'm watching this, and there was one false, pin.
Yeah.
He B.J. Suplexed him into a table. It was like false counting where it was an unhonorable match. He suplexed him to the table. It doesn't break, which I thought was cool, showing it's a real table. Then he does it again. The table breaks. He covers Carino, and Carino they're both great, but Carino's a veteran. One, he kicked out. He saw how many 1-2s there were. He kicked out.
Yeah.
The little nuances is gone. And I'm gonna blame one guy on this one. Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace came from Japan. That strong style bullshit that he put in. Sorry about swearing, but that one really gets me mad. He put in this strong style. Everything is 1-2, but you hit it on the head. A roll-up, grab from a schoolboy, not even a roll-up, a schoolboy. It drives me absolutely crazy. And when you talk to these young men, they look at you like you're 200 years old, that you're dribbling in your Mapo, and it's evolved. No, let me punch you in the eye and see if you're going to punch me back. You know what I mean?
And because, Kevin, you know what? And you and I can say this more than anybody, bro. They could say whatever they want, evolved, this and that. You know what will never go away, Kevin? The numbers. The numbers are there. They're documented, period, end of story.
Okay, so where I was going, and I got sidetracked. How has Vince, and you worked with him so closely, because to me, at one time, Vince was your assistant, okay? How has he let this go on with these 20-minute promos, these horrible matches? And again, I'm not knocking anybody, please. I don't even know the kid Miz. He had Sandow. Sandow's a great kid and a great performer. He's got him as a stunt double. Please, I know that if you were up there, it wouldn't happen. How has he allowed this to happen? And I don't believe Hunter wants this either. Yeah. Hunter's a smart guy. He's got the NXT, which is outdrawing. He's created his own NWO that's outdrawing WWE. How is Vince allowing this to happen when he has, Roman Reigns? Let's get him off the forbidden list. Let's put him back to work in 30 days. And Brock Lesnar. I see money in just a poster. Brock versus Roman Reigns. Take off that stupid vest. Let's see his body. How do you think Vince has allowed this to happen?
Well, Kevin, I think it's this, bro. Listen, I know you. I got to work with you a little bit. I know your reputation in the business, and anybody can go look at the career of Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, you've always been ahead of the curve. In order to be ahead of the curve, you got to be hip and up to date with what's going on right now in society. What's going on now? Because you've got to have the, you've got to have the mind to see beyond that. What's next? And you were always hands on. What's happening now? Always ahead of the curve. I was connected to Vince McMahon's hip for 5 years. I saw firsthand, Kevin, Vince McMahon has nothing else in his life but the WWE. When I say that, Kevin, when you and I, we could talk about shows like Breaking Bad and shows like Game of Thrones. You see how television is changing, which is their competition. Kevin, Vince does not watch TV.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
Ray, I flew. I was working in Japan for 3 years, but I'd taken the bookings, right. I'm booked in Jamaica for 3 days. I come back to Jamaica. On the way home, I'm too tired. I stay at the Marriott rather than driving the Keys, right? So I walk in the Marriott, check in. Who do I see? Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. Mm-hmm. He's saying, I'm here to meet with Vince McMahon. It's my first time. He said, I'll do anything they want. Okay. He leaves. But before he leaves, he does, I'm a bad guy. He does Scarface. Scarface was just out. Yeah. Hottest thing in the world. Yeah. He told me just recently that when they wanted to make him something, he said, well, what about this? He broke out into the, I'm a bad guy.
He had no idea what Scarface was.
He had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. And I could tell you a million stories like that, Kevin. So basically, it's not evolving. That's the problem. It's going backwards. And Kevin, let's face it, bro. He's a 70-year-old man. I mean, Kevin, we're all gonna be a couple of steps behind when we just are. There's nothing wrong with that. But bro, when you don't have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in 2016, bro, you're just gonna have that niche audience that's gonna watch the product if the word wrestling is in it.
Oh yeah, and they're gonna watch it because it's been on the longest running, right? They're going to watch it. There's nothing else for them to do. They go and have a drink, take a muscle relaxer and pass out and watch the program at the end.
Right.
I mean, I would like to say there's things that excite me and say, but they get, and I think you'll agree with me, Vince, the bigger, stronger, and faster. The kids, right? Mm-hmm. But they have nobody to direct them. Yeah. And they get this camp, okay? This beautiful building. Everybody's going to learn how to take a bump the same way. If you ever watch Tully Blanchard's bumps, he doesn't ever take the same bump. He falls like a fighter. He got that from Mark Lewin. I mean, everybody's going to work exactly the same. Yes. You know what I mean? Let's get them in this 100,000 square foot building, and we're going to have a trainer train them. but he's going to give him, not going to give him the nuances how to draw money.
Yep.
Now they've lost Dusty, so there's nobody there
Yep.
to tell them.
Yep.
You got to tell a story
Yep.
to draw money.
Yep.
It ain't just me wrestling you. That doesn't work.
They write the script. They write the script. They can't freelance. They're creating robots, and nobody's there. Everybody's the same. That's the problem. There are no stars because they're all going through the same system. Kevin, let me ask you this, because I think you'd be surprised by my answer. Because I don't label myself a wrestling guy. I label myself a sports entertainment guy because of what I grew up on.
Right.
If tomorrow Vince McMahon called you and said, Kevin, fix this. It's yours. Fix this. I'm going home. What would be the first thing that you would do?
Put Brock over as the champion.
Yeah, I say that all. He's the hood ornament, right? The hood ornament.
Yeah. I put Brock over as a champion. I get him on ESPN, and I wouldn't get suckered into him fighting this Hunt. I'm really afraid that this Hunt is going to knock him out in the first round.
Yeah.
This kid's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, like I said, my family's been in boxing for a couple of 100 years. Their thing, they don't call it a shoot, they call it going to war. Okay? My cousin Peter that fought Mike Tyson, he had the exact same number of wins that his dad did, okay? He was fighting tin cans. They were promoting the fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He fought about 3 guys legitimately. I would get Brock, somebody like Ed Ferrara, say that I found him in Borneo, shoot Eddie up with about 400 cc's or something, give him a couple of bottles of wine and send him out there to get his ass kicked. You know what I mean? Don't put Brock in a situation like this where people think he's the baddest man on the planet. No matter what happens in this fight, unless he knocks the guy out right away, and I don't think he will, or have the guy tap out right away, people are going to be disappointed. And if he loses, you're bringing him back and saying he's the toughest man on the planet.
Yeah, look what happened to Ronda Rousey after one loss. One loss, that's it.
Right.
You know? Kevin, you know what I would do? And I want to see what you think about this. This, I think you'd be surprised coming from me.
Okay.
You know what? The first thing I would do, I would tell every match, keep the match in the ring. Let these guys learn freaking psychology of a wrestling match. Let me believe somebody is getting hurt. Let me believe somebody is trying to win this fight. Don't leave those four ropes. Stay in the ring. I would love them to tell those kids that today and see what they do.
I'll tell you a funny story. You're absolutely right. Eddie Graham, you know, he was way ahead of his time. And I remember Bob Orton had just started. He was a 21-year-old punk or 20-year-old punk. Great guy. And there was a guy named George McQuarrie. George was amateur wrestler. And I think he was an alternate on the 60 Olympics that were in, 60 was in Rome. The 64 Olympics in Mexico City. He was an alternate, didn't make the team. George was a guy that was going to make Florida his home, right? And Bob Jr. was getting ready to leave with his dad, okay, Bob Sr. So Eddie, they came, and like I said, Tuesdays was Eddie's Tampa, and Wednesday morning, he came down to make sure your pencil was sharp, right? Mm-hmm. So he said, what are you going to do in this match? I said, well, I thought I put Orton over because, you know, McQuarrie's going to be here forever. He said, no. He said, let them go out and shoot. I said, what? He said, let them go out and have an amateur wrestling match. He said, because Dusty's going to bloody you at the end of the show. Let's keep it toned down until the end of the show. It will mean more. They went out. I never saw a high spot. They went behind each other. They went about 7 minutes, and Bob beat them, you know. And we didn't, you know, the old stuff that you and I always talk about, timing, you know what I mean? He said, don't worry about the time. We'll make it up on the other end. He said, if I have to, I'll edit the tape. Yeah. it's like you said, he made it. There's no sense for them to going out and doing all these high spots for two guys that were, one was going to leave and the other was going to be a guy that got booked 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, Kevin, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's hysterical to me. Kevin, it's a work. We're working. Yeah. We're working. Kevin, have you ever seen any more injuries than you're seeing today? You guys are working. That's the whole idea. Nobody's supposed to get hurt. It's a work. And Kevin, I said the same thing. These guys want to go out all these big spots. They want it to be real. You know what I say? You know what? If that's the case, then make it real. Then go out there, fight each other in the ring. Let's see who wins the match. Make it real. It's not real. It's a freaking work. And everybody's getting hurt in the work.
Absolutely. I remember somebody saying to me, well, I can't lose. I said, is there a record book somewhere that says you're going to lose in Sarasota, Florida tonight? 20 years from now, they're going to look up this and say, oh, he lost to Steve Kern in Sarasota in 1984. I said, what is wrong with you? And Vince, I think that is a booker's mentality, that you understand it's a work, because at 9 years old you knew it was work, okay? Mm-hmm. I understood it was a work because I had that mentality that, hey, this is entertainment. Boy, I really like this. And then when I saw the Sheik, I said, then when I smartened up to it, I said, well, the more you make it look real, the more you're going to draw people. Yep. And I think this thing about, well, I hate when people talk in the third person. Well, I don't think we'll take a name. I don't think Rick would do that. Jesus, it's berserk to me.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, listen, bro, I've had you on here almost 2 hours. I could talk to you all day. Kevin, you definitely got to come on. We just scratched the surface here, me and you.
Yes, I'd love to come on, and thank you for having me on, Vince.
Now, Kevin, tell everybody about, because I know you do 2 shows on MLW, right?
Oh, I do one. I'm on MSL Radio with M. He's fabulous. Great history. His great-grandfather was the longest-term prime minister. We're on Fridays, 5 a.m., so please turn on. And then I want to plug one other thing.
It's all yours.
A friend of mine found one of those, where you buy the storage unit, mm-hmm. and it had all this wrestling in it. And it had one section of all these tapes of me from Florida and Hawaii and all over the world. And you can get it at Kevin Sullivan Booking at gmail.com. I mean, it isn't just my stuff. He sends you a catalog out of all the stuff he's got. He's got some very weird stuff, that you would never think of. Stuff from England, in the 70s. It's really good.
Kevin, do you do social media at all? Like, do you do the Twitter and the Facebook and all that?
Well, I used to do the Facebook. Then there was 5 fake Kevin Sullivans. And the Twitter is, Vince, I'm out here in the island so far away, I feel like Napoleon when they put him on the island Elba. In fact, my wife is out crabbing right now. Crabbing season started, so no, I don't. But you have my number. Please call me.
And it's
at any time.
Book Kevin Sullivan at gmail.com.
That's it. Yeah, Kevin Sullivan Booking at gmail.com.
Okay, Kevin, I'm going to wrap this up, but I want you to just state it because I want to give you a personal, thank you once I wrap up the show. But there he is, everybody, the great Kevin Sullivan. I promise you he will be on again. This is one of the most enjoyable talks. Kevin, I wake up every morning. I hate wrestling. I hate everybody in wrestling. Why did I ever get in wrestling? Wrestling sucks. And then I have a conversation like this. And I'm like, okay, that's why I got into wrestling. So everybody, the great Kevin Sullivan, I'm sure he'll be on the show again. Book Kevin Sullivan at gmail.com. Check that out.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again. Add another swerve and then put it on a pole again. Put it on a pole again. Put it on the pole again. square to quad. It's gonna get emotional as I wait to overbook the damn car.